I'm Rue.
Hi, I'm Janel. And welcome to episode 18 of Cocktails in Compliance. We are so excited to be here. It feels like we were just here a couple of weeks ago.
Because we were.
Right. But what happened was we went to Washington, D.C. and went to NAHMA, and we have so much information to share with you that we could not wait to get back in studio. So our cocktail today.
Ooh, so glad you asked. We actually are drinking things a little bit different from each other, but today I'm having Dragon's Milk Stout. So I am so excited, and I'll let Janelle tell you what she's having while I open mine.
Well, you know what we're not having is Twisted Tea. That will never be featured on this podcast ever again.
Thank goodness.
So no disrespect to 7-Eleven, but I need you to up your alcohol game. So what we did was take a field trip to Total Wine. Since we were here last, I took some time off. I spent some time in Germany. I fell in love with German beer. So while Rue has Dragon's Milk, I have Erdinger. I can't even pronounce it, but it's delicious. It's dark, it's delicious. There it is. I'm going to let Rue crack that open for me. Thank you, Total Wine.
Thank you, Total Wine, for having a bottle opener.
Just so you know,
novices at this.
there's always one here.
Well, see, we thought that.
We thought there was always one here, but, super excited to have some dark beer. Cheers. Oh, man, that's so good.
So good.
I'm so happy right now. We probably should have brought more of this with us because we've got a lot to cover. So my suggestion is you get a beverage, you fasten your seatbelt, and let's go. So we're going to start with some regulatory and legislative updates because that's a good time on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
That's why we have beer. HOTMA. I'm going to give you a little tiny snippet, and we're going to get into it in more detail in a minute because I want you to stick around and hear what's going on with this. So we talked about this last time, that the compliance date was extended to 7/1/2025. Really, the update that we got in this session was that Rural Development published a timeline and guidance that they're going to align with the HUD multifamily housing. Yep. So again, spoiler alert, we're going to talk about it some more in detail. We're going to talk about it from a HUD perspective as well as a tax credit perspective. NSPIRE. Again, this is another stay tuned. One thing to talk about here is it was a very different. So for those of you that don't go to NAHMA, we talk about what we're going to talk about with all the government officials the day before. So we're like, yeah, we're going to talk about NSPIRE. Members expressed concerns about software, about assessing inspection reports, data inconsistencies, inspection duration, canceled inspections, and losing points for tenant-caused issues. I know one of the things that I heard is they will send an email to somebody and go, hey, I'm coming. Here's when your inspection is scheduled. It may go to their junk email, and suddenly they come in one day and here's an inspector. So,
wow, how would that make you feel? It's like not having time to clean your bathroom before company comes.
Yeah, it is. Okay, moving on. So fiscal year 25 PBCA, this proposal would allow HUD to award cooperative agreements for PBCAs through a NOFA, a Notice of Funding Opportunity, rather than the federal procurement process. So in the proposal, while the text is identical to the general provision proposed in the president's fiscal year 2024 budget request, HUD now needs to work with Congress to continue clarifying and refining the proposal throughout the fiscal year 2025 appropriations process. As I said, we'll talk more about that later. This was the session where, again, all the members talked, and then we'll give you the HUD response here in a little bit. The 2024 income limits. Not sure if you guys noticed there was a new cap on how much income limits can increase annually. Since 2009, HUD has limited the year-to-year increase as the higher of 5% or twice the percentage change in national median family income. Okay, y'all know I don't do math, so hold on.
That's a lot.
Okay. So this year, HUD is putting an additional parameter such that if twice the change in national median income is over 10%, the cap in that year can't be greater than 10%. So they're calling it the cap on cap.
Well, and I mean, why make it any easier when you've already made it difficult?
Basically, what they said was it's either going to be 5% or 10%. And then there's math to figure out how. I'm going to let them do the math and just tell us if it's 5 or 10. Next on the list was the Trax forum. So I don't know how many of you have ever been out on the Trax website. There's a lot of good material there, but there was a forum where people could make comments. So HUD closed and removed the forum from the website effective September 13th due to limited to low utilization. So they are now utilizing the drafting table and the Federal Register for comments. We'll talk about that some more in a minute too. So this was kind of new to me. It's actually the 30th anniversary of VAWA. So 5 federal agencies issued a statement to affirm continued commitment to implement housing provisions under VAWA, which is the Violence Against Women's Act. In case you're curious, the 5 that signed on for that were HUD, USDA, Treasury, DOJ, and Veteran Affairs. That's regulatory.
Interestingly enough, it was also the 30th anniversary of the Education Foundation for NAHMA. And we'll talk more about that later, too.
Spoiler alert, Rue's going to talk about that later, too. On the legislative side, government funding is always the top thing that people want to know about. We are still under a continuing resolution until December 20th. So as you may know, December 20th is kind of in between an election and an inauguration. So who knows what's going to happen to that continuing resolution, if it's going to get extended or what happens. Stay tuned. The Tax Relief for American Families and Workers Act of 2024. This allows for financing of 200,000 rental homes through the use of tax credits and bonds. So the House passed this act, but it did not advance in the Senate. Now, the thing that's interesting here is it is actually a lame duck possibility as there are ongoing negotiations. Typically, again, we're very close to an election. Things don't tend to happen other than campaigning, but there is some activity going on with this bond. So kind of keeping an eye on that one. From an insurance perspective, and again, insurance was a big topic. We're going to get into that in more detail as well. HUD has revived their property insurance requirements for wind and named storm coverage by increasing the maximum casualty insurance deductible amount for wind or named storm coverage to the greater of $50,000 or 5% of the insurable value per location, up to a maximum amount of $475,000 per occurrence for new mortgage insurance transactions that have not achieved final endorsement. So for those of you that tend to be in that range of the country that tends to have a lot of claims due to wind or named storms, just know that those requirements have changed. You look like you're ready to say something to mess me up again.
I'm not going to say anything. Well, I was going to say, all you people who are not in the area where all the storms happened, thank everybody for the rising insurance cost. It's all those named storms.
Yeah. There's been a couple of those lately.
Yep.
And it's interesting because in one of the sessions that was there, they showed a map of the country and they showed over the last several years like events. And it's not just hurricanes, guys. It's wildfires, it's tornadoes, it's hail, it's, a number of things. But there was some consistency on where those were geographically. Just saying. Anyway.
Dang global warming.
Okay, sure. So the next thing on the legislative agenda was the FCC ban on bulk internet. I know we've talked about that before. There is a proposal seeking to eliminate arrangements imposed on tenants that force them to stick to a specific service provider, but that proposal is on hold. No surprise, there's a lot of things on hold right now. All right, so this one was interesting too. So Fannie and Freddie have adopted new tenant protections. Some of this may not be new to some properties in terms of how they operate, but just know that these new protections have come out. Renters must be notified at least 30 days in advance of any rent hike.
I mean, that's kind of common, isn't it?
You would think.
You'd think.
Renters must receive a 30-day notice before their lease expires, regardless of whether the lease ends naturally or is terminated by the landlord. I would think that's happening anyway.
They probably have been told.
Right. And then renters will have up to 5 days after their rent is due to make payments without facing fees, evictions, or other penalties. So I know sometimes we've seen like a 3-day late period, but now it is a minimum of 5.
Across all affordable housing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that was our reg leg update from that session. So let's now talk about insurance. So there was a session on strategies for insurance risk and claims mitigation. And I know NAHMA in particular has done a lot of work. They've had a working group that was formed to talk about the challenges, talk about what they can do. How do we help combat the rising cost of insurance? To date, there have been 20 separate billion-dollar weather and climate disasters that have impacted the U.S. through August of 2024.
Just this year.
Through August of 2024. So we know that there were other things.
First 3 quarters.
Right. And so we know that there have been other named storms since then. So we know that number has gotten higher. So again, through August 24, that year-to-date event cost is $53 billion. The average for any year is $62 billion. And again, like I said, we know that we had some other named storms that came through afterwards that were terrible. Premium hikes exceeding 25% across all lines of insurance are increasingly common. Probably not any surprise to anybody who's listening, because I don't think we've talked to a single person who hasn't had some major hike in their insurance premiums.
No, and I mean, even like it happened last year and it's going to happen again this year. If yours is not already renewed, it's going to happen again this year.
Yeah,
too.
because like I said, in August we were at 53 billion with an average of 62 billion. I guarantee you we have surpassed that 62 billion average with the last couple of storms. You know, I mentioned earlier that when you looked at a map, there's a geographic range that tends to have these claims over and over and over. So it should not be any surprise that the top 5 metro areas with the highest year-over-year change in insurance premiums: Tampa, Orlando, Miami, Houston, and Atlanta. So, and especially thinking about, you know, Tampa, and again, this was in August. We know something else came after that. So, man, really feel for those of you that were in the path of those last couple of storms.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So here's another interesting thing that was mentioned in that session. They looked at a breakdown of operating expenses by category for a 12-month period ending June of 2024, and they were comparing and contrasting conventional and affordable properties. For conventional, their top 3 operating expenses were real estate and other taxes, being 24%, payroll being 21%, and repairs and maintenance being 17%. For the affordable properties, the number one was payroll, 25%, then followed by repairs and maintenance at 19%, followed by utilities at 17%.
Well, that's easy because some of the properties are not allowed to bill their residents for utilities. So that's an easy thing to understand why it would be higher.
Yeah. The other thing that was interesting for me to see, because when we hear about insurance, we've heard specifically about affordable properties that have been denied insurance coverage. So when you look at insurance for both, insurance was 8% of OPEX for conventional properties compared to 10% for affordable properties.
It's really interesting, though, because I was looking at those same slides and I don't remember the exact numbers, but the total is fairly close.
It is. It is. So the industry is continuing to look at potential legislative solutions and different administrative actions to help mitigate these costs. I mentioned NAHMA has an insurance working group. They've done quite a bit of work. So they also presented, they came up with very, very, very specific strategies and even broke down these categories by geographic region. And the areas they looked at were interior and exterior mitigation strategies for things like roofing, siding and structural construction, landscaping, fires, water, and security. So if you are interested in those, and I strongly suggest you check them out, they are posted on the NAHMA website. There's a section for advocacy, and under that is for resources. And this presentation is posted there. It is open to anyone.
That's what I was about to ask.
Yeah, it is not locked down to just member access. So this is also one of those things, you hear us talk about advocacy, and we talk about what a great job NAHMA and others do. This is a prime example. This is a huge issue for the industry. And this is what NAHMA is doing. There are very practical tips in this presentation for things that you can do to help lower your insurance costs. So I strongly recommend that you go and check that out. While you're on the NAHMA website, you might check out other things under the advocacy and resources pages. And if you like what you see there, I strongly recommend that you attend a meeting and see what that's all about.
Next one's in March.
In DC. We'll be there. That's a bonus. You get to meet us.
That's right.
Yeah.
We're always there.
That's true. Odds are we'd have a beverage with you in the lobby at some point. So, all right. So then we got into a session on tax credit updates. So we've talked in the past about the Inflation Reduction Act. So that was the largest investment in clean energy in United States history. Much of that investment is delivered via tax incentives. So there are potential benefits for developers. So those of you who are still building tax credit properties, you can get immediate savings through reduced costs for equipment and other building components. You can also see reduced energy usage over the long term, which benefits both the building owner and the building residents. For solar and battery storage insulation, you have the ability to maintain power during power outages. Speaking to those of you that develop in Texas, I'm thinking about all our lovely rolling brownouts and all that fun stuff that we do in the summer. So something to think about.
Or a hailstorm that cracks the solar panels.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I don't know how you're going to maintain power if it cracks your solar.
Well, that's
don't
why I
know.
was surprised when you said you're able to maintain power. So I was like,
I was thinking about electrical power outages.
tell me.
You know what? You got to focus on this some more. Anyway, some other benefits for solar in certain jurisdictions, the ability to monetize extra energy that you produce and generate a supplemental revenue stream, which is actually interesting because if you think about ancillary revenue, I'm not sitting there going, you know what? I'm going to put some solar panels on. I'm going to generate some cash. But you know what?
From who?
I think from whoever you bought the solar panel. You know, I'm not a solar expert, Rue.
I mean, they can't generate any ancillary income. So that's amazing. You should all look into that immediately.
Yeah. Maybe consult someone who's a solar expert because we're not. So tax credits. What I have heard consistently, and I know we've heard this at multiple conferences, 2025 is going to be the year of tax action. So Congress is expected to consider sweeping tax legislation because the bulk of the tax changes for the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act are set to expire. So there's a lot of considerations like what's it going to look like? Who's going to be president? Who's going to control Congress? What's the margin going to be in each chamber? How much is Congress willing to spend on a tax bill? And I'm using spend loosely. Will Congress be able to use budget reconciliation to sidestep a Senate filibuster? What will the state of the economy be? So again, there's a lot of questions. You can listen to any political commentary that talks about what life may look at depending on any given scenario, any combination of who controls the House, the Senate, and the White House. But there are tax writing committees who are preparing now for all of those various scenarios. So specifically the Ways and Means Republican tax teams are considering policy options. The Finance Republican working groups are also convening, but the Democrats on the committees have not announced a formal process. Doesn't mean they're not doing anything, but they just haven't announced. But there's already a lot of work prepping for whatever is about to happen. So I'm going to be really curious to see what comes out of this next year and how that impacts the industry.
Maybe there could be something national for workforce housing.
There could be because we still hear workforce housing mentioned every once in a while. HUD actually mentioned it when their staff was there, which I think is the first time I've heard the multifamily housing staff mention the middle income layer.
Yeah.
So I suspect that will happen. So interesting that you say that as I'm sitting here scrolling on my stuff. I'm like, were you looking ahead on the notes?
I'm just smart.
Okay, so
this happened the last time too.
You're smart and you're intuitive. So good job. Guess you're working on your clairvoyance too. Like you also do have the notes in front of you. So,
but I wasn't reading them.
You weren't reading.
No,
That's
I was
why
not
I said
cheating.
You didn't cheat. And I don't know if you just printed them or you actually read them. So
No,
good
I
job.
didn't.
If you didn't read them,
No.
you just printed.
I was going to follow along.
All right. See, back to your clairvoyance. So at this session, there was a representative there from NCSHA, which is the National Council of State Housing Agencies. All of your state housing finance agencies belong to this organization, and they meet and they talk. And wouldn't it be wonderful if they all held hands and used the same tick? But that's another story for another day.
That would be amazing.
But they have
And the same reporting platform.
well, right, like the XML.
Yes.
Just if anyone cared what my preference was. But they have already put together their list of tax priorities as well. I am sure they are going to be very, very, very active on the Hill come January.
They're going to be very busy making changes to ticks too.
Yeah, they're already
I know
doing
this
that.
is a whole different section, but
I
we're gonna
know.
have to fix them again.
True. Anyway, so in case you were curious, their list of their tax priorities, what they are going to be campaigning for, lobbying for, is removing the cap on housing bonds for 5 years, raising the housing credit cap by 50%. Feels a little ambitious.
Like a lot.
Lowering the bond financing threshold to 25%, optimizing carry forward PAB authority for housing, providing greater flexibility for basis boost, closing the qualified contract loophole, facilitating GSE investment in rural housing credit properties, modernizing the MRB and MCC programs, and establishing a neighborhood homes credit. So that's their list of items. We'll see how that goes. They're really good about posting updates as well, and we can continue to update on those as we get those updates. So Rue did talk about.
Oh, we get to talk about
We do get to talk
now.
about forms. So, see, she truly didn't read ahead because she would have seen that as the next bullet item. So NCSHA did release model compliance forms. They published those the last week of August. I know we've talked about that on a couple of podcasts, but it was great to see NCSHA say, hey guys, we put out all these great forms. That's cool. Could you make your members all use them? That'd be amazing. So we'll see what happens. But they have published the owner's certification of continuing program compliance, the TIC and the TIC instructions, the asset self-certification, and the accompanying worksheet, the affidavit of student financial assistance, student status verification, and student self-certification. So again, in a perfect world, all the states would use all the same forms. NCSHA has done a lot of work to incorporate, I'm sure, all the feedback on all the best of all the variety of state forms into these standardized forms. Again, selfishly, as software vendors, it'd be awesome if I only had to maintain one version of those.
Do you know where anybody can go and get those forms if they just wanted to look at them?
I would bet they are on the NCSHA website.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if you knew, and that was a session that I actually missed, so I didn't know if you'd gotten that or not.
Yeah. Okay. So then we started getting into the tax credit side of HOTMA, because if you are a tax credit property, God bless you, because I don't know what state you're in, but every state has decided to do something different. Shouldn't be a surprise, but there you go. Kind of some background on that. What this presenter said was that most people in tax credit thought leadership agreed that when HOTMA changed, it amended the HUD 4350.3 because of the tax credit section 2 existing regulations. So they went, well, you changed it, here we go. So they said nearly all in thought leadership aren't looking for Treasury to opine or weigh in on it. They're like, it's published, it's here, just do it. So they said, basically, the law's changed, let's move forward.
Wow.
The state HFAs are generally in agreement in updating their tax credit policies in accordance with HOTMA. I thought that was a really nice way of saying that they're, let me quote that, generally in agreement. Yeah. So about that general agreement, let's talk about timelines. So I think the most aggressive state in terms of HOTMA compliance has been Texas. Texas has been live with HOTMA, and they are already issuing 8823s if you are not compliant.
I mean, didn't the HOTMA tick for Texas come out like in January?
I don't remember how long ago,
but it was like immediately.
I think it was the first. Yeah. But they are the only state that is actively issuing findings if you are not compliant with HOTMA. Then again, that's on tax credits. If you have a layered property that has HUD, you can't implement some of those things yet. So,
Good luck with that.
So Arizona and Missouri have also gone live with, yes, ma'am.
I just want to take a second, though.
Okay.
Before we move on to the next thing, it's not about the software not being HOTMA compliant for you, right?
Correct.
It's when you've got multiple programs, you can't implement for one without doing it for the other, right?
I think what they're saying is they want you to use HOTMA calculations for tax credits, even though your site software is not updated, but use the current existing one calculations for HUD. So it is quite the challenge if you are a site in Texas that has both.
Is it time to talk about the software being updated yet? Or do you have that in another section?
Let's hold off on that till we get to the HUD piece of it.
Okay.
Because we're going to talk about timelines and such with that. So Texas, you're getting findings if you're not HOTMA compliant. Arizona and Missouri are technically live with HOTMA compliance, but they are not going to issue any 8823s until July 1st of 2025. So they adopted that extension.
Because they're nicer. Just kidding. We love our TDHCA people.
So they adopted that extension that HUD came out with in September. So there are still a list of states that said, we don't care that got extended till July 1st. Our deadline for compliance is January 1st, 2025. Those states are Georgia, Idaho, Illinois, Indiana, South Carolina, Tennessee, Wisconsin, and Mississippi. I feel like I just announced like the top 10 at a beauty pageant or something. Like, Miss Georgia, come on down. Anyway, so that's January 1st is that list of states. There are other states that said, hey, you can implement things now, but you're only in fully non-compliance after July 1st, 2025. That's Colorado, Florida, Iowa, Ohio, and California. Interestingly, there's been no comment on the date for noncompliance for Minnesota, Nebraska, and New Mexico. So what I will say, regardless of what state you're in, this tends to change on an ongoing basis, whether HUD extends as they did with July 1st. So our recommendation here is we can tell you how it is right now today. I don't know that it will look the same in a week. I don't know that it will look the same in January. Please, please, please actively be in contact with your state housing finance agency on what that non-compliance date is for you. What can you implement? What should you implement? What must you implement? And when is that date of non-compliance?
Well, and I think, too, it's important to stress that, right? Your neighbor can't tell you, your coworker can't tell you, like really and truly, the best thing to do in this situation is be in contact with your state HFA.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. You want to switch gears to NSPIRE?
Sure.
Cool. All right. So we said that on, the first day of the conference, we got member feedback, and I will say most of it was positive. And they talked about, in general, their NSPIRE scores match their REACT scores. There's always some exceptions, right? But from the NSPIRE team, what they said is we are now 1 year into NSPIRE. And so how do things look? They said the process is working as expected. They said properties that tend to have more life-threatening conditions, especially if those are found in units, are receiving lower NSPIRE scores, while properties with fewer unsafe conditions are scoring better under NSPIRE. Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So that's in line with the program objectives, which focuses on properties with the highest health and safety risk. Out of the top 10 defects causing the largest score deductions, 6 of those defects are considered life-threatening. The largest is exposed electrical conductor, and that has a deduction of 14.73 points per 100 units inspected. So if you're a resident customer, please reach out to your sales contact or your CAP. They
Or
can
me.
tell you, or Rue.
I really can talk about it.
And I'm going to say too, I'm going to shout out Seth Daughter
Yeah,
real quick
for
too.
sure.
So at NAHMA, it's not a trade show, but the vendors, and we're referred to, our membership category is called affiliates. They have a breakfast every meeting, and we're not there to pitch products or talk about our companies or whatever. We are there as thought leaders, and we're speaking on popular topics, whatever the hot topic is. We're coming in as experts and giving you some advice on things you can do. And so this time the theme was NSPIRE. And so our sister company, Site Comply, their CEO, Seth Daughter, came down to DC and spent some time with us and spoke about how to prepare for your inspections. We can plug it now here. He does have a tool for that.
Yes.
That's the tool that Rue was talking about.
Yes.
It is a wonderful mobile inspection tool. So back to what I was saying about the top 10 defects with the largest scoring deductions. Absolutely, as you are doing those pre-inspections and you are looking, please know exposed electrical conductor is the top defect that causes the largest scoring deduction. So make sure you're paying particular attention to that. Out of the top 10 most commonly cited defects, 2 of those are life-threatening. The most common is smoke alarm is not installed where required, with an average defect count of 16.25 citations per 100 units inspected. So part of your pre-inspection, make sure your smoke alarms are installed. And we know that tenants tend to take those down. You might want to talk to your tenants about why that's a really, really bad thing. And it's also going to cost you on your inspection. Electrical, egress, and fire safety defects impacted NSPIRE scores more than other types of defects. And here's the thing that I thought was interesting. They do have a unit threshold score fail mechanism, which caught an additional 4% of properties as a result of poor unit conditions, with 30 or more points deducted for units. So looking at the overall NSPIRE score distribution, 89% of NSPIRE inspections had a passing score of 60 points or higher. 11% were failing, meaning they were below 60. So let's go back to that unit threshold. So 4% failed because of the unit threshold. So they would have scored a 60 to a 69, but due to poor unit conditions, which is a 30-point or higher deduction, it pushed them down into a 31 to 59 scoring group.
Well, what does it mean by poor unit conditions? Does it mean that resident is not upkeeping their unit properly?
It doesn't necessarily mean that it's the resident, but it means that there were so many defects found at a unit level as opposed to your property level, because then they're thinking about the health and safety of the actual residents. And so if more of those defects are found in the unit, that's going to have a higher impact on your score.
So what that means is do your unit inspections, your pre-NSPIRE inspections, and make sure you're paying particular attention inside your units.
Okay.
We have a tool.
We do. Rue can tell you about it, whether she's drinking or not. All right. I'm going to take a deep breath here, and I'm going to take a sip, because now it's time to talk about what happened when the HUD multifamily housing staff showed up. Ready? All right, let's go. So they covered a number of topics. So I'm going to just very rapid fire go through some of those, and then we'll get to the good stuff. So they talked about insurance. We've talked about insurance earlier, different ways to mitigate risk. From the HUD perspective, they said they are working on OCAF changes to reflect the increase in costs. So that's awesome from a budget perspective. They recognize, so they're trying to help out. Funding challenges was on the list of items. We did talk about earlier that we're still under a continuing resolution until December 20th. That puts a constraint on HUD. It limits their travel budgets. But they did then turn around and say they're not concerned about lapses in funding. So that's good. If you are having funding issues, I strongly suggest you reach out to your PBCA about that.
I just remember in the past when there were funding issues, at some point in time during conversations, I would have heard it through the people, just the number of people that I have conversations with kind of on a day-to-day basis. And I'm not hearing anything right now. So
we're not. So that's good.
We're going to keep crossing our fingers that it stays that way.
We sure are. So then they talked about management and occupancy reviews. So the streamlining has been in place for 2 years. But as a result of that, the MORs are lasting longer because it's taking longer to review the number of files since the last MOR. So they are prioritizing troubled properties, and they're looking to include changes to risk-based implementation as part of the PBCA rebid.
Does everybody know what streamlining is?
Probably not. Well, I hope so.
And this is particular to HUD properties, right?
It is.
Okay.
Basically, it's you don't have to have it all the time. It's a risk-based system that you may be getting your MORs every 1, 2, or 3 years.
And that is dependent on your score.
Correct.
So if you get a bad score, they're coming back.
100%.
If you get a good score, you might not have to see them for 3 years.
Correct. But then brace yourself, it's going to take a little longer because then they have 3 years of files to review. So we talked about they're looking at changes to that as part of the PBCA rebid. The ongoing rebid. No, I'm thinking back because I remember
2009.
I'm thinking back to the third time we worked together. The PBCA rebid was a big thing. We were selling contract administrator software at that point.
But it happened. But the original rebid happened the second time we worked together.
Correct. And then the third time they tried to do it again, and that's when all hell broke loose. And they were like, yeah, I don't think so. So that was a really long time ago. So we're still thinking about how we're going to do this. And at the last NAHMA meeting,
almost 13 years.
Right. Almost as long as we've been waiting for HOTMA. I had to say it. Okay. So
that's how long we've been waiting for 203A.
So the last time the multifamily staff commented on the rebid, the joke was, doesn't matter what we do, somebody's going to sue us because they didn't like the process. So what they have been doing is holding a series of listening sessions with stakeholders, and they've determined that they need legislative authority to keep the program going. And that's kind of what I talked about earlier in the reg leg update. So what they want to do is move the rebid process to be done by federal procurement. So they literally need legislative action from Congress to say, hey, we support this program, and here's how you have to rebid it.
Why do they have to have that? Because this is not a new program.
It's not a new program, but the point of contention has always been how the rebid is done.
Again, it shouldn't be a question about whether it's okay to keep the program going.
Right.
It looks like they're putting the blame on that.
Well, so what they have said is they will keep the money in the program in the meantime, but they will hold off on a rebid until Congress says this is technically how you have to do this rebid, so that it can't be contested legally after the fact. Then there was also some conversation about bifurcating Section 8 contracts. The 4350.1 Chapter 28 is now on the drafting table for comment. There are 3 to 4 more chapters that are in clearance and should be on the drafting table by the end of this year. And I didn't realize this because we don't look at the 4350.1 very often from a software perspective. We're more looking at the 4350.3. The 4350.1 is about asset management. This is the first set of updates to this handbook since 1992. We thought HOTMA was bad. These people have been waiting for this handbook for a long time.
I actually have nothing. I got nothing.
Well, they're getting to it. Okay. They also mentioned a very interesting Harvard study that looked at a period of time from 2001 to 2023, adjusted for inflation. Because we all talk about, rent costs are higher, and so they looked at it. And renter median income during that time frame rose 2%. Do you know how much the renter median rents rose? You do, because you have it in front of you.
Bum, bum, bum. I don't know. Just tell me.
21%.
That's what I figured.
Okay. Certainly highlighting the need for...
It's the only way we're going to get that cost down, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep. Okay. You ready for the really, really good stuff?
Yeah.
So then the giant elephant in the room, they start talking about HOTMA. And funny thing, that morning, about 2 hours before they spoke, all the updated forms that we have been waiting on from a software perspective appeared on the drafting table for comment.
That doesn't mean they're ready to be implemented in the software, ladies and gentlemen.
No, not at all. The forms got posted on the drafting table on October 24th. There is a 30-day comment period for industry stakeholders to provide feedback. They also have to post those forms in the Federal Register and allow a 30-day comment period from the time those are posted. And those two periods, though, can overlap, which is interesting. So it's not like you post it on the drafting table, you have 30 days, they look at the comments, and then they post it on the Federal Register, and then you have another 30 days. Like, they could post it tomorrow on the Federal Register.
Or they could have posted it the day after they had posted it. So it could already be in effect.
Could have, but I haven't seen it. So we know that there's a 30-day.
Well, now that they've canceled all the working group and stuff, who knows?
Right. So we know there's a 30-day clock ticking on the forms, but we know there will be another 30-day clock once it goes to the Federal Register. So HUD also said that they have been working on some HOTMA FAQs, but they couldn't answer some of the questions until the forms were released. So now the forms are released, so they should be able to update those. They also talked about there was some confusion about the VASH income calculation. There are discussions that are still ongoing. They said they're trying to align with public and Indian housing on that. Okay, so here's where it gets interesting. Someone said, hey, you talked about things that, and we've even talked about this on our podcast too, right? Like, what can we implement prior to software changes? And one of the things that we've talked about was you had to update your ESPs, right? And so what they've asked is for HUD to pass down word to the PBCAs to just note if those were not updated for HOTMA, but not to have an actual MOR finding. So they did agree to that, which was nice. Then thinking back to the drafting table and the Federal Register and that whole process, we told you before the TRACS working group was dissolved. So there was a comment asking HUD if they would please reinstate the working group so that we could make it was really, we've had it in place for 20 plus years. It's been very effective. We've had very smooth TRACS releases, utilizing that process where the feedback between HUD and the stakeholders was happening on a pretty rapid base, right? And just wouldn't unnecessarily drag things out. So there was the request to reinstate the TRACS working group. HUD said that's not going to happen because there are legal concerns about who's doing the work. I will tell you, there were those of us in the audience who have participated in this for a long time who wanted to stand up and say, well, we're doing the work because you guys didn't have the bandwidth to, so you asked us to, so we helped you by drafting it.
It was a donation of time.
There was a lot of volunteer hours.
Yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, it was still technically HUD's work. We just kind of sped the process along.
Well, and it was
bit.
beneficial to all of the vendors' clients.
Yes. And then we talked about the PBCA rebid, but apparently there are some of those contracts there. I did not get all the details, and that's on me. There is something that's going to expire in January related to that. And they said, hey, you realize this is going to happen, and you could have some changes in PBCAs at the same time that you're trying to roll out HOTMA. And what a freaking nightmare that's going to be. And so could you maybe work to, not have that happen? And they said, yeah, we get it. It's likely going to happen. We'll just do our best to manage it. So let's hope there aren't PBCA transitions when all this happens. So if you recall, we told you guys back February 20th is when HUD said we're going to extend the compliance date till July 1st, 2025. So I asked the HUD staff, could you please clarify, what does that mean? Does that mean certs that are effective on July 1st, 2025? Or do you mean whatever work I start doing on July 1st, 2025 and moving forward, then I have to be in compliance? And they said, oh no, we mean certs effective on July 1st. And I said, well, okay, now I'm really concerned because let's back into that date. So if you're processing certs with an effective date of July 1st, 2025, that means you start 120 days prior, which is March 1st, 2025. Like Rue sort of alluded to earlier, and I'm going to say this again and again and again, and I know we've sent out communication to our customers. I'm assuming the other vendors have as well. But there still seems to be this misconception in the industry that the software vendors are responsible for the holdup of the software updates. That could not be further from the truth. So I'm going to say one more time, we are at the mercy of HUD. We do not have a final MAC guide. We do not have final forms. I just told you those forms are on the drafting table. The 30-day clock is ticking, and I'm still waiting for that other 30-day clock. So again, I'm back to the software has to be updated by March 1st.
We have coded, and I'm sure the other vendors have as well, coded as many things into the system right now, sitting out there in another release for you that you are not accessing today because you shouldn't be, but sitting out there in another release for you that's just waiting on the final changes. But we can't turn anything loose until the final changes are communicated to us.
Right. And not only can we not turn those loose, but it is November 1st today.
Oh, yeah. We're in another month now.
I know, right? It's freaky. But it's November 1st. We know the 30-day clock on the Federal Register review of the forms has not started yet.
That's only 120 days from now.
Correct. So at the time, we were saying maybe HUD's going to post these tomorrow for all we know, and the 30-day clocks are going to go. So best case scenario we were looking at was we would have everything that the vendors needed December 1st. That gives us 3 months, which now we know is not going to be 3 months. We will have less than 3 months to code those forms, test our own changes, do test submissions to tracks, and then I don't even know how we're going to have an implementation period for sites. It's literally going to end up being I'm going to flip a switch and congratulations, you're all on tracks 203A, because normally we have 6 months for vendors from the time everything is finalized to code and test those changes, and then a 3-month implementation for sites to gradually roll over. If you are a PMC that has 20,000 units, as an example, you're not going to turn that on for every property at once, nor do we want that to happen, because as much as we can test, we want that gradual rollout as well so that it doesn't impact payments. So what I was trying very, very hard to stress to HUD was, you've given us very little time. We are not going to have enough time to thoroughly test this. And if you want everybody to be in compliance with certs that are effective July 1st, then you are putting at risk the payments for your entire portfolio of 30,000 properties who couldn't get paid if there's a tracks issue. I don't understand why the severity of that impact is not being fully understood.
What if it is, and they're just trying to say that we're going to do it because we've already missed our deadline by so far? And
and so when I said that to HUD, the response, I got 2 responses. One, I got in the middle of it going, but this has been out for so long and we have to get this done. It's a high priority. And I'm like, sister, you are telling the wrong person. I am fully aware of how long these regulations have been out there and how long we've had to implement it.
2019, right?
17. So anyway, or 16, sorry. 2016 is when the act came out. But what they did say was, yeah, we hear you. And we have the ability to adjust the date if we need to, but this is a really high priority for the department. So, look, I know there are a lot of conversations happening behind the scenes, vendors, trainers, consultants who have a lot of concerns. One, about the process and how these forms are being reviewed, and 2, the time frame for adequate testing. So, there are still conversations happening in the industry. Again, this is what we know, is they're still sticking to the July 1st deadline. All we can do as vendors and industry stakeholders is continue to express those concerns as high up the chain as we need to be honest. And then all the vendors are doing their best to meet this time frame. So,
well, and you don't just mean the owner agent vendors either, right? Like we've
Correct.
got the contract administrator software vendors too. So, you know, the 2 softwares have to speak properly to each other.
Yes, they do. So
when's that testing going to happen?
It will happen in parallel with all the other tracks testing. So that'll be part of it. Is we will send test submissions to contract administrators, and we will send test submissions directly to the tracks database.
Guys,
so
reach out to people at HUD and reach out to people higher up than what you've been talking to.
Express your concerns about this date and about
make a lot of noise.
And again, I think the noise to make is they are risking sites not getting paid if there is a tracks error. And we know how important those monthly payments are. As I said, payroll is your number 1 expense. I know you're using those payments for payroll, for
mortgage,
for utilities, all of those things. And we don't need to put that at risk. You guys already have enough challenges. You need to make sure you're getting paid. And we're
on your side.
We're doing our best to make sure that happens as well. Yeah.
We are.
So, okay. All right. So, on a little bit lighter note, we'll switch to a happier topic. There was I say it's happy. The
pink and blue thoughts.
Sure. The actual session was called What Keeps You Up at Night? And there were 3 different topics that they focused on there. And one of them I wanted to follow up with all of our listeners, because it's something that we've talked about ongoing, and that's staffing challenges. That doesn't seem to go away. We started talking about this really in depth during COVID and the challenges. And the challenges have not have not gone away, but what we wanted to do was bring back tips that we heard during this session, things that other management companies are doing. Maybe it works for your management company, maybe it doesn't, but really our job is to pass that along to you. So here are some suggestions that were discussed in this meeting. I heard a lot about training. So they talk about really adopting a mindset of training and specifically leadership training. If you think about, taking your site staff or your regionals or even your corporate staff and taking an individual that you know has a lot of potential and you want to invest in and help them understand what that career path looks like and help get them that training that they need to move up in their career. Things like letting them shadow someone in that next role that they want to be in.
I just want to, it just brought to mind yesterday when we were prepping for our upcoming webinar. And so Janelle and I are going to be in Tennessee in a couple weeks doing a podcast. Sorry, not webinar, a podcast.
But we have a webinar next week and then a podcast. So you weren't wrong.
We got a lot happening. We're going to be in Nashville in a couple weeks, and we're going to be doing a podcast live there for the Tennessee Affordable Housing Association. And I, having not been to that conference before, really kind of had to reach out blindly to people and ask them to participate with us on our panel. And so we had our prep call yesterday, and I was so excited to see younger people on our panel, because you don't know, obviously, who you're reaching out to. You just reach out to them when you have never met them. And so it was really fun, and really, I'm so excited to see young people and their story on how they got involved. Obviously, family history there, but it was just really refreshing to see young people, and I'm really excited to see what they talk about during our panel there.
I agree almost 100% with you, except for that one point where they told us what year they graduated from college, and then I felt really, really old.
Well, and I'm 10 years older than you, so think about how I felt.
Well, you're not. But I do agree, and I was excited, too, to see someone younger. And we've talked about that in podcasts in the past, right? About you've got this set of employees who are retiring, they're aging out, and they're retiring, and how do you attract more to come in? So, again, leadership training. They added a DEI committee. One of the things that I thought was interesting, this is one that was a little touchy, is they started looking at comp schedules for the roles in the region. And they said that a 3 to 4% annual increase just isn't going to work. And so they really had to battle during budget season, but they presented all the facts. They were able to come up with a way to work this into their budget, and they moved all their positions to the high end of that pay scale for those positions and also increased commissions for their site staff.
Well, so that's interesting, because when we were talking earlier about the operating expenses and the salaries being higher in affordable housing, right? So I've always been of the opinion, and it's just been through talking with people through all the years that I've been doing this, that it was less on affordable housing. So maybe what you're talking about here is part of what's driving that number where the salaries are higher, which I'm so excited. They're
worth every penny.
Oh my gosh. It's amazing to think about what it could cost you if you didn't have the right employee there.
Exactly. So they also created a report with KPIs that is released monthly, and the sites compete against each other to, whose sites, whose regions are performing the best, and they earn points. They can use those points either for prizes, or I thought it was really cool, they can also use those for charitable donations.
Oh, that's cool. I love that.
Yeah, so that was nice. We've talked in the past about how it's really hard to have flexibility for people that, you need them on property, right? And how do you let them have flexible work schedules? So they said, they gave their site teams laptops, and they let them do administrative tasks at home. So that does give them a little bit of flexibility. So maybe you don't have them in an office for 8 hours a day, but you let them, maybe go home in the afternoon and catch up on tasks. And
I'm a fan of that last sentence in that one.
I am as well. So they also, in some cases, implemented a 4 10-hour day. It's funny because I joke that I work 4 10-hour days anyway.
Exactly.
But not just 4 of those. But
right.
Anyway, or sometimes 4.5-day weeks to give them some flexibility as well. No surprise, this is kind of where the conversation has gone with AI. They are using that to fill staff gaps. They're not using it to replace staff. They're using it to fill gaps. So they've implemented things like self-guided tours, online leasing for all their sites, electronic compliance software. This particular person said they're testing AI for collections. So again, when you're having challenges, look at technology to fill those gaps. Again, you're not looking to replace heads. You're letting them focus on the residents, focus on the property, and anything that can be automated, let it be automated. And again, if that gives people flexibility and that allows you to keep your staff happy, by all means, look at it.
Exactly. I mean, so many apartment communities that are in affordable housing only have one person in that office anyway. So if you can do anything like that to take a little bit of a load off of them and let them focus on something else at the property that's as important as what's taking up that time, that would be great.
Yep. Multiple companies said that they added roving staff for all roles. So if you think about it, you've got somebody out sick, you've got somebody on vacation, you have someone out on some sort of leave, you've got this roving staff that can go and fill in as needed. And the question from the audience is, well, what if there's nothing for them to do?
Yeah, how do you fund that?
Well, they said that's never been the case. They have been busy from day one. So I guess I would look at, do the math, right? How many hours or how many days do you have X number, whatever rolls out, and figure out how you can staff accordingly with a roving team. Another thing I thought was very interesting and can sometimes be a little controversial is they brought back employee surveys. And not only are they rating their job and rating the company, but they're also rating each department that they interact with and what those interactions are like. So again, I think that's really interesting. I think it really encourages teamwork, gives management companies a very clear picture of what's working, what's not, and where can we find some places to improve. And again, AI came up because someone said, well, this is great. How do you have time to interview and how do you successfully screen candidates? And they mentioned intelligent interviewing, which is an AI tool, and it allows them they use AI to screen the applicant's answers to questions, and AI based on the criteria that they get from the management companies, it helps them know who do I focus on and who do I avoid. Now, I will say the first thing that came to mind is I started thinking about screening and some other things. There's some examples with AI where they said, well, based on the criteria, you ended up inadvertently discriminating. So what I would say is just be really, really careful. It can be used for good. Just make sure that you're being very thorough about what you're doing. Maybe have your lawyer look at it too. But I can see where it could be used for good.
Sure.
You just got to be careful like any other AI tool. There were some specific things that they also called out for maintenance. And I think we hear about maintenance more than anything when we talk about staffing challenges. And again, you've got this pool of talent that, again, as they age out and things happen, it's very hard to find people with that skill set. So one of the things this company did was added on-call bonuses twice a year for their maintenance staff. That's in addition to the overtime pay that they're giving them, but they're recognizing that, those people are going above and beyond, giving some bonuses there. Two strategies that I thought were super intriguing is most of the local apartment associations have some sort of maintenance academy. So what they are doing, they are finding candidates and they are paying for that person to attend that maintenance academy. And if they pass that course, then they hire them on full time.
I think that's awesome. And I think, your maintenance technicians are so important to so many things. Like they certainly have an impact on your NSPIRE score. They certainly have an impact on your customer satisfaction. So take care of them. And they're hard to find right now. So, man, if you get a good one, take care of them.
Well, and the thing that's interesting there is they said, well, I'm going to interview somebody and I'm going to go, do you know HVAC? Yeah. Do you know how to fix this? Sure, I do. Well, this helps you know that they truly are qualified and they truly do have the skill set that I need. If they can pass your apartment association's maintenance academy, then they're probably going to be a great addition to your team. The other thing that I thought was pretty cool is they are providing each maintenance staff team member with a $750 bag of tools. And if they stay on for a year, they can keep that bag.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I think that's really awesome. Both things, the tools and the academy, cost money. So hopefully they're getting a return on that investment, and it sounds like they really are. I mean, wouldn't it be great to have an employee that's been there for longer than a year instead of the turnover? And that's awesome.
And that's actually what they said. They are seeing that return because you're not having that turn. They said they're seeing people who are either staying a long time or they stay 6 months. And so if you can hire the right person, make sure they're qualified to do the job, look, if you pay for training, you're going to benefit from that.
Absolutely.
From that training. If you're buying them some tools and they stay for a year, I mean, that's less than the cost to go, hire and, staff and source candidates and all of that.
And look, I mean, I will argue all day long that employee satisfaction is as important as customer satisfaction.
I agree. All right. So to wrap us up today, I'm thinking about wrapping up the NAHMA conference. In October every year, you guys know Rue loves to talk about the Education Foundation. Well, we have a gala event every October. So we all get to dress up a little bit, have a good time. It's a wonderful event. It is a fundraising event. There are silent auction items. There are live auction items. As always, we have a prior scholarship recipient come in and talk about how that scholarship impacted their life. And it's probably one of the most heartwarming things of all the things Rue and I get to do. So Rue, I'm going to let you tell us a little bit about that because we raised a lot of money and we've granted a lot of scholarships this year.
Well, not only that, but first off, I want to tell you a little bit about the Ed Foundation. So if this is really important because we need scholarship applicants. Mm-hmm. So if your property is a member of your AHMA or NAHMA, all of your residents are eligible to apply for a scholarship from the Education Foundation. And we take all of our scholarship applications. We have a review committee. And a couple things about this year. First off, this was our 30th year anniversary. So it's awesome to think about that this has been happening for 30 years. Mm-hmm. And through the course of those 30 years, Ed Foundation has awarded 1,323 scholarships.
That's amazing.
I mean, think about how many children and adults, because even if you're an adult and you're doing something to further your education, you are eligible to apply for this. And so that many people, over 800 residents. And so what that means is that some of our scholarship recipients have been multiple year recipients, and they come back for the whole 4-year degree period, and we continue to award them. And
let me stop you there. This isn't just college scholarships either, correct?
No, that's right. We'll do trade school as well. And so we know, and that kind of goes back to what you're talking about, right? We're having a hard time staffing for trades right now. And so we absolutely will consider them in the application process. The last number from the 30-year time period is $3,398,000 have been raised over 30 years.
Okay, that gives me chills.
I know. It makes me teary. Every child deserves an opportunity for an education. So to that point, for this year specifically, we awarded our highest number ever of scholarships. I believe we awarded 118 scholarships.
It's fantastic.
We raised so far this year $540,000 towards a $600,000 goal. So we're almost there. That gives us the room to award a few more scholarships each year. If you're interested in contributing, let me know. I'm always happy to point you how to make donations. But seriously, that is one of my favorite events every year. It's incredibly rewarding, and it's an incredible honor to be able to do these things for children in affordable housing.
Yeah,
so
love it.
Love it.
Yay. All right. Well, I'm sitting here looking at the clock on my laptop.
We've been here for an hour.
We've been here for a while. So I know that this one was longer than normal. Thank you for hanging in there. As we said, we had so much information to bring to our listeners and share with you guys. Again, we strongly encourage, if you own or manage affordable properties, please get involved with your affordable housing management associations. You could do it on a regional level. You can do it on a national level. This is the type of information that you get from these meetings. So again, we want to share and disseminate this to as many people as we can. We tend to post it on LinkedIn as well.
I want to add something there, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just to get involved so that you learn, but when the staff from these associations go and lobby on your behalf, obviously there is strength in numbers. And so the more people that they can go out and say, hey, this is what we represent, the more strength they're going to have whenever they're lobbying on your behalf.
Yep, absolutely. We bring this to you here. As Rue said, we're doing a webinar next week. We post on LinkedIn. If you're not connected with us on LinkedIn, please do so. And then you can find Cocktails and Compliance powered by Prop Talk on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcast. And thanks for joining us today. And we hope to see you again soon.
Oh my gosh, we didn't even talk about where we're going to be. If you're going to be at Affordable Housing Finance Live, please stop by and see me. We had so much to talk about.
I know. I totally forgot. Yeah, there's that. And Nashville.
And cheers, everybody. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. and we'll see you soon.
Cheers.